like foods like freeze-dried broccoli and flour or something to, rice that they could make special meals differently than just the silver pouched foods. So yeah, I mean, it's just really interested in looking at how important food is on like a 2+ year mission to Mars, and what thinking maybe a little differently about the food systems could do to improve the crew dynamics, crew cohesion, and to maybe even lessen the stress of isolation and being so far from home.
Yeah, there was I remember reading about it was an early Soviet. Was there one before Mir? Anyway, it was Mir. Anyway, it was two cosmonauts, and they had a project which was to see if onions would sprout and grow normally. And so they got this stuff, they opened it up, this experiment they're supposed to do, and they were supposed to report back, how did the onions grow? So they opened up they got the onions, and the onions had grown, and they were sprouted, but in the same supply box, there was also some bread and some salt. So they just looked at each other and they ate the experiment. They're like, guys, I'm sorry, we couldn't help it. We ate your onions. It was just this like fresh food. They couldn't not eat it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's too tempting. And if you look at like polar expeditions or anything like that, like food becomes so primary. People become obsessed with it, And even now, I feel like during this pandemic, it's just become such a focal point for so many people, special meals, special recipes, trying new things that you haven't done before. Like, I think I read somewhere that the King Arthur Flour Company, they really had to change their operations around and put more people on customer support because very green bakers, like first-time bakers, were calling in having no idea what to do with yeast. And so they were really helping like a lot of people figure out how to bake their bread.
Yeah, it's like a Mars mission would be this unique torture of like you're isolated, so you don't have a lot of stimulation and excitement and from outside sources, so you're stuck with what you have. And in terms of food and the obsession you get with food, what do you have? You've got these, like you said, these pouches, or the food tends to be very very bland intentionally, because anything super spicy people get tired of more quickly, but it's still really bland. Apparently there's tons of hot sauces and condiments up on the ISS. Like, everybody.
And there's a shrimp cocktail that has horseradish in it that's a favorite. They really like that. It just like gives a jolt. And I found that to be the case. I have to say, on the mission itself, there were so many options. There were so many food options. I didn't feel bored with the food, and we were cooking our own meals, using these shelf-stable ingredients, powdered eggs, powdered butter. And, my experience was that I wasn't bored, but in this, I really do kind of, there are some similarities to what it's like now under, quarantine or quasi-quarantine or lockdown situations, that I have found that different flavors, spices, just anything that's sort of unusual food-wise I really valued it. So I can see, like, even on an ISS mission, you're actually not that far from Earth, but you're not going home very easily. I think that different food options or the ability to create and recombine is really important. And you actually see that. You look up YouTube videos, and astronauts are like making a steak burrito, out of some beef steak, open up the beef steak, and then you have a bean burrito. And there's a real tortilla culture too. This is what I've learned, that you can use tortillas. They're so shelf stable that they're very common on the ISS, and you can make all sorts of sandwiches or burritos or wraps or whatever. So that's sort of where the creativity comes in for ISS astronauts.
Yeah. What is it with tortillas? Why are they so shelf? There's a package in our cabin that's been here for like 3 months, and there's no mold. What do they do to them?
Yeah, I don't know. There's not a lot of moisture there, so.
I guess so. Yeah. I thought, food boredom would be a nice segue to just boredom in general. You have an essay on boredom in the book, and it was like a deep dive into boredom, as only one who is stuck for 4 months inside a Mars simulator can really undertake. And there's something like 4 or 5 different distinct categories. People have written philosophical treatises on boredom, the positive elements of it, the negative elements. What was your experience of boredom? Was it excruciating? Was it actually kind of freeing?
It was strange because, you know, we were selected for this mission because we were supposed to be astronaut-like in our temperaments or something like that. And I knew that astronauts don't get bored. That's something that we were told again and again. And, you know, how could you? You're in space. If you're bored in space, there must be something wrong with you. So, you know, as a crew, we talked about it a lot. We certainly were not bored. No, we were not bored at all. But there was something that happened toward the end of the mission. You know, I was sitting in my room. I looked across the way to where the bathroom was, and I saw this guy in the bathroom. His hair, he had red hair, it was slicked back. He was kind of thinner, wearing this black t-shirt. And I thought, I have no idea who that is. Like, that does not look like the 3 guys on this crew. I think a stranger has come to use the bathroom in this. And so it kind of caused me to panic for, you know, a good, I don't know, 5 to 8 seconds. And then he turned around and said, "What?" And I recognized his voice. It was Simon, the engineer. And he had lost a little bit more weight than I was used to, and he had shaved his beard. And so I felt this jolt of emotion and feeling that I hadn't felt in like more than 3 months. And I realized that I was kind of like operating at this like baseline sort of fogged state. And it made me really rethink what I think about boredom and myself and my own particular brand of it. I thought that I never got bored. You know, I could entertain myself so easily in almost any situation. I was sure of it. But I think what that actually meant was that I was almost constantly bored and always looking for ways to entertain myself because like I kind of like needed some sort of simulation. And when that wasn't there, because the habitat, you know, we had inflatable furniture, we had movie night that we could move around, and we would have movie nights, and we had celebrations every month to mark milestones. But like, honestly, the day in and day out it was a lot of filling out surveys, working on the computer, you know, cooking food, having meals, filling out more surveys, filling out surveys again, and then more surveys. And so like there was a lot of sameness, and I think that it really got to me, and I hadn't realized it until that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned is that astronauts, I mean, people think of astronauts and fighter pilots as these very, it's this very exciting, kind of brave, hyper intense experience. But in between those moments of intense experience, there's just an amazing amount of tedium. Like there's this quote, Gene Cernan on the way to the moon said, and it's in the mission transcript. I mean, the man is going to the moon, and he goes, "Funny thing happened on the way to the moon. Not much. Should have brought some crossword puzzles."
Yeah, I know. It's this great irony. Like the great adventurers have to deal with such tedium in between like bouts of extreme adventure, like thinking they're
like Antarctic explorers as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's actually a very special kind of personality that can operate at those 2 extremes, because it's like a sharp peak of excitement and then like a long duration of not a lot of excitement. So like balancing those 2 is, I mean, that's a pretty special personality, I think.
Yeah, very much so. I wanted to talk a little bit about who would be like for an actual Mars mission. Like who should go, and you know, the NASA has, you know, certain astronaut qualities that they look for, certain personality aspects, etc. But on a much more basic level, physically, I mean, there's some, you know, there's advantages to certain groups in the population that I thought you could talk a little bit about that. And anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I might, like, I just muted because I'm in Washington Heights, Manhattan. It's kind of loud outside sometimes. So I might, if it becomes too loud, I might actually have to do that while I'm talking. But Yeah, one of the things, there's an essay called The Standard Astronaut, and that came out of a piece that I wrote for Slate about an all-female mission to Mars. And the thinking was, and this occurred to me during the mission when I noticed the way that we were all eating as a crew, 3 men and 3 women. And, you know, I was analyzing data from body media armbands that was estimating caloric expenditure. And the thinking was that, you know, food is a pretty significant part of a payload on a long mission to Mars. And, you know, from what I saw, the women on the crew were expending, you know, not even half the calories. We weren't going back for seconds like the guys were. And so I thought, well, gosh, you know, if you want to save weight, and you always do because of the rocket equation, you know, you want to have a lighter load if possible, just send people with lower metabolisms, and on average that's smaller women. And so I proposed this idea, you know, if you care about money, I think it would make sense to think more about sending an all-female crew. And okay, sorry. And
I love these dramatic pauses.
Yeah, and relatedly, I also thought about my late brother, who is in the book a lot. I write about him. He passed away in 2016, and just was really with me during the writing of the book. But he was born with spina bifida and didn't have the use of his legs. And when you look at, you know, astronauts in space, the legs are a real liability, especially on the ISS. You're in zero G. Astronauts use their legs, their toes mostly, as like ways to stabilize themselves. But by and large, the legs are such a major muscle group, and you have to exercise them a lot. And so with like big bulky equipment. And so I was thinking about my brother, and I thought, well, I mean, there are plenty of like veterans who are amputees from these recent wars. Like, why not send someone who could have interchangeable legs, you know, like thinking of redundancy built into, or adaptability built into engineering systems. Why not have like different kinds of appendages that are lightweight and could provide like varied functionality? Why not think differently about the types of bodies we send to space?
Right. Legs, I mean, legs are useless in zero gravity. They get in the way. They have to be fed. They have to, yeah, it's like if you imagine, you know, eons from now, if we, you know, we end up living in space, you can imagine what we would basically have evolved to be like fish. I mean, there's no, they don't need legs. The other thing about legs, they, you know, that's where you have the most of the muscle and bone loss. That's, you know, astronauts end up, that's a serious concern with long missions. So get rid of the legs. Just use, then people who don't have them would be at an advantage on so many levels.
Yeah, and I think you can just think differently about, like, that could open up all sorts of different engineering questions and answers, and you could just kind of, you know, I think that there could be some real innovation if you just thought a little bit differently about bodies in space.
Yeah. When I was working on my last book, I met a double amputee legs, that is, like at the hip, who had a lot of problems with. He was at Walter Reed. He had a lot of issues with bed sores from the bones, you know, because he's just directly on those bones. And I was talking about the Vomit Comet, the, you know, zero gravity simulator, and he was like, I would give anything, because it just, you know, to take the pressure off. He said, I'd love to do that. I would love to be weightless, you know. And I actually tried to get NASA to let him go on a flight. I didn't get very far, but yeah, it was just interesting, his take on that, like to be weightless and, you know, to just be able to float.
Absolutely.
But yeah, but it would be, yeah, it would be something. It'd be great to see NASA embrace that, or whoever ends up going to Mars. let's switch direction. Oh wait, one question I wanted to ask you, and I think people might not understand. This took place, this habitat was in Hawaii, and I think that, you know, people hear that and they're like, how is Hawaii like Mars? Like, why are they in Hawaii? But there's actually a good reason.
Yeah, so the habitat was at 8,000 feet on the mountain of Mauna Loa. It's actually an active volcano, not very active, so that wasn't a concern, but it's very red and very rocky up there. The Big Island is amazing for its diversity of ecosystems. There's actually rainforest as well as desert. It snows on those mountain tops. So yeah, it was a great place because it was isolated. It took a while to get there, but there was still like you know, emergency response nearby, civilization was relatively nearby, but the sense of isolation was really, really profound, just geographically speaking. And it was really red and rocky, so.
Yeah. I see we have a question, the physical size of your dome that you and the others were in.
Yeah, it was roughly, I forget the square footage, maybe like 1,000 square feet, kind of like a 2-bedroom apartment. But the way that it was laid out was fairly spacious. You know, we had a first floor, and then you had this dome structure, so it felt like you had a lot of room above you. And then there was a mezzanine area where our staterooms were, and there were 6 of us on the crew, and so there were 6 of these staterooms and then a bathroom up there. And the rooms are about the size of a walk-in closet, and because of the curve of the dome, they kind of it sloped as you got to the bed, which was positioned at the back end. So,
yeah. Another question. I'm just saying them as they come up. Have you heard whether NASA or SpaceX have thought about different types of astronaut bodies in the way you proposed? Is that something you've ever discussed with anyone at NASA?
No, I hadn't come across it. You know, in some like, no, I mean, no. I guess the short answer is no, I hadn't come across it.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I have to say the piece that I wrote for Slate and in the book, there's information about how there were some sort of metabolic analyses of astronaut bodies. And so like when you look at it as an engineering system, you know, plugged into these other systems, and you look at inputs and outputs, then people had noticed that women on average, like smaller women on average, do require fewer resources in space. So that was a discussion that happened, I think, like in the 90s, but it wasn't a big discussion. It was kind of like, I think the thinking is like, we maybe want a more diverse group of people going to space, not just women. I don't know if that's actually what the thinking was, but that proposal didn't get too far.
Yeah, I mean, I know that they've been aware of this from the beginning. Even the Mercury 7 were like little guys.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And those systems were built for smaller guys. Exactly.
Yeah. There's a question. Can you speak some more about how you found out about this opportunity in the application process?
Sure. I found out about it through Twitter, of all places. And there was an NPR article about, I think the title was something like Why Astronauts Love Tabasco Sauce, and I was pretty curious about why they might like Tabasco sauce. So I clicked on that and read all the way to the end, and my prize for reading an article to the end was the link to the application for HiSeas. And I looked at it and it seemed like something like I really wanted to do. Actually, like I got like a feeling in my body, sort of like a tingly feeling, and I thought, oh, I have to do this, at least apply. So
yeah. One of the things I remember reading about, and you know, in your book and also in my research for Packing for Mars, which is some years back, was the psychology of isolation and confinement, and the very specific things that happen to people who are confined in a space, not, you know, either by physical walls or because they're in a dangerous place and there's only, you know, they have to stay together, like in Antarctica. And some of the psychological progression that happens. And I remember I was there when people came out of the Mars 500 simulator, and there was this bunch of people in the press who were like, tell us all the fights you had, and they're like, we all got along very well. And people are like, yeah. So anyway, tell us about all the fights you got.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the things like you were talking about, like the guy who came down the stairs and his flip-flops would make this loud noise. It's like irrational antagonism is the term that I've heard used for when you're stuck with somebody and the things that didn't bother you, suddenly you're like, I want to kill you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, as a person who writes and observes things, I might have been a little bit more prone to noticing these things than others, and I did notice the cadence of that crew member's like hard-soled sandals as he clomped down the stairs, and it was the same every time, and I was so amazed by that. And also, I'm gonna sound unhinged if I just go through all the little things that bug me that I had to sort of like deep breath let go. But yeah, I know it's just a common thing, this idea of microstimuli, that over time when there's not a lot else going on, those irritations just like grow larger and larger. And yeah, I have a list. I mentioned some in the book. And in terms of fights, you know, we didn't always get along. I think that we were a pretty good crew by and large. We were all very committed to the cause. There were some personalities that probably wouldn't have gravitated toward each other had they not been in a Martian habitat for 4 months. And so there were certainly some clashes at times, but it was nothing that really, it certainly didn't like ruin the total overall crew cohesion or anything with the mission. You know, that's one of the biggest concerns. Kim Bin said, the founder of the project, the principal investigator on HiSeas, has said that, you know, the human system in this system of systems, complicated system that goes to Mars, if that fails, it could be as disastrous as a rocket explosion. And that is absolutely true. I think, you know, we were just in for 4 months. Had it been longer, that would have been really, I mean, I don't know what our crew would have done. Like if we had known it went longer, then maybe we could have prepared for it. But if they told us, sorry, you're going to be doing this for another 4 months, I think that would have been, I think it would have been a whole different ballgame, honestly. It would have been really hard.
Yeah, yeah. I've got one note here. It says, I was Kate's HiSeas crewmate. I want to know if she'd go back to the HiSeas and live in sim again. Maybe a moon simulation, question mark.
Who's asking that? Who says that? It's Cyan. I don't have to. I'm okay not. You know, I love that place. It's a very special place. I hold a very special place for that dome in my heart. I like the experience I had. I mean, I might be more interested in going someplace else like Antarctica or I don't know, that underwater habitat would be
Right.
spectacular. So HiSeas is really nice though, don't get me wrong. That dome's great.
Do there tend to be a lot of repeat customers? I mean, do people who've done one? Yeah, they do it. There's a like professional simulator participants.
Yeah, so, and this is what Cyan actually does a lot of these, and as an analog astronaut, and you know, it's great because maybe not everyone in the population is well suited to isolation and being so like into providing data to help further the cause of space exploration. But there's definitely an analog astronaut group that does this a lot, and you know, asking all sorts of different questions. And that's the great thing, because you're getting a diversity of research questions. You're getting really good people in there.
Yeah.
Helping figure things out.
Yeah, yeah. What was your sense in terms of, I mean, I remember talking to, was a cosmonaut who, I mean, he's retired now, but we were talking about Mars 500, that simulation, 500 days. And he was saying, it's nothing like Mars. People think it's, you know, and I'm not sure if he was talking about physically. I mean, I think he was talking more, not so much the psychology, but the, you know, it's cold, it's filthy, it's, you know, it's stressful. You have, you know, the interactions with ground control, whatever they call that in Russia or the former Soviet Union. They, what was did you feel like, yeah, this is what it might be like, or was it just a sense of like a kind of a weak version of it? What did you feel? What was your feeling like? Could you, especially if someone's looking at the psychology of it, do you think that a simulation experience can come close to providing that?
Oh, it's such a good question, because there's so many things that are missing. I mean, just to start off, there's like the habitat itself, it wasn't pressurized. You know, it was kind of a leaky tent. So like you had this sense that like the outside was actually coming in. You didn't feel that closed off. You know, the spacesuit simulators that we wore were like nothing close, and we weren't trained like you would be trained on a mission to Mars. You know, we were people who were motivated to do this project, and we had some training beforehand. And I know with HiSeas that changed over time. There was more training, but if you're going to Mars, you are going to be trained for years and years with the people that you're going to be on that mission with. So it's very different. Plus, you're going to Mars, and the psychology of going to Mars and being on Mars and then coming back is I mean, yeah, it's very different. So what you're looking at when you're doing these experiments is some version of the stresses of isolation. I did think it's interesting because like the stories that we carry with us when we are in like isolated, stressful experiences, I think really do matter. And so like the stories of astronauts on a mission would be like really carrying the fire. This is something for humanity. This is a big deal. The whole planet is watching. And like there was none of that for us, but we all had stories. You know, we were there to help the cause. So like that was our main story, even though it's like many steps removed from the actual thing. You know, that was the thing that we held on to keep us motivated. So I think that I think you can get some information. I think when, just like any sort of simulation of anything, it's like a computer simulation doesn't give you actual reality. It gives you, you know, you choose your variables, you choose your models. And I think that in this case, you chose what was simulated, and that was isolation, and in particular, like a communication delay, which was really stressful. You know, we didn't have real-time comms. So that matters, I think, a lot. And you do feel cut off. Like I didn't have social media, thank God. And I wasn't getting news all the time. And I couldn't have a real-time conversation with anyone. So
talk a little bit more about that. You had this wonderful term that you came up with, Techno Schmeretz, was it?
Yeah. I mean, this idea that technology, in particular like social technologies, when they fail us, it feels really bad because they are truly, like, nominally meant to connect us and make us feel like closer to each other. And so when they fail, and I'm talking about, I mean, things as simple as a dropped phone call, or something weird in a Zoom meeting that you can't control, like, or like a mute. I mean, everything that can go wrong or just feel weird. And like, I know a lot of people are feeling it with these Zoom like happy hours or whatever. It's just, it leaves you feeling like, I mean, it's a simulation of a human interaction, and it leaves you feeling kind of hollowed out at the end of it. So I think that this is a problem that it could be in user design. It could be, that I think could be addressed in user interface design for sure, or at least considered, because like on a 2.5-year mission to Mars, that is a big deal. And if your technologies are antagonizing you rather than like actually helping you connect, then that's just like, I mean, yet another unintended consequence of isolation that you don't want to have surprise you.
Yeah, the idea of a message taking 20 minutes to arrive, and then the reply another 20 minutes. So you're talking about 40 minutes between. There's essentially no way to have a conversation. You're back to almost like writing letters.
Yeah.
You know, and we're not used to that. We're used to constant contact. So I can imagine for a modern human being heading out into that world, there'll be, you know, kind of a techno shock.
Yeah, I think so.
Isolation beyond the physical isolation from Earth.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that that was one of the areas that was, it's a really important research question. And so that's something that HiSeas can do really well.
Right, right, exactly. They did have that actual delay, the 40-minute delay.
Yeah, it was for our mission. They had some kinks to work out, and it came a little bit later. And I don't know what the exact systems that were used to do that. I mean, I know there was an email server that was delayed. So yeah, it basically just feels like,
It's wonderful. You in the book, there's these excerpts of your mom, right, communicating
yeah,
with you through Dragon, was a speech recognition,
yeah.
and you not knowing, is this the software or is she forgetting her words? What is going on here? And not being able to ask her.
Yeah.
And yeah, just
Yeah,
to,
exactly. It felt terrible. And like, I mean, it just like, it brought up all sorts of things that I just didn't want to be thinking about when I just wanted to have a nice email exchange. And I appreciated that she was using this new technology and like enthusiastically. She was like very, very happy to not have to type, she could just speak, but the errors that came through were disconcerting, and, it just made me feel bad.
yeah. I'm going to ask another question that's been up here for a while. What biometrics were monitored during this study?
We all wore body media armbands, so that's a basic activity and like estimated caloric expenditure and sleep data, and that was the full extent of like the on-body monitoring. We had a lot of surveys that we filled out about our activity and our moods. And I can't speak to the missions that came after. I think that there was a lot more monitoring tech employed in those missions, but I don't know exactly what that was.
And there's another question. What were the types of movies you guys have for entertainment? Were the types of movies randomly chosen, or were there specific titles to appeal to a general audience?
We had movie nights on every Wednesday and every Saturday. And we just, as a crew, we brought our own favorite movies or things that we thought people would be interested in watching. So I think I brought Real Genius, that movie, because it's kind of like nerdy science movie and kind of funny. And there were other, like, I think we watched definitely space movies like Stargate and Tarkovsky's Solaris. What was that?
Moon.
And Moon, which is such
Moon.
yeah, by Duncan Jones, David Bowie's son.
Yes, with Sam Rockwell, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to, oh wait, Mary, listening and reading to Kate's story, would you change anything about what you wrote for Packing for Mars? Oh, sure. I mean, anytime you read somebody else's perspective, I mean, I would have loved to include more about what we were talking about earlier about people with disabilities and how legs are a liability. And I would have loved to have a conversation with somebody at NASA, the astronaut selection people, and just to sound them out and to see how close we are to a point where that might be feasible. And also just because Mars is becoming more of a reality. I mean, Packing for Mars was, 2011 maybe? So there's, it feels like today we are much closer. I don't know time-wise if we really are that much closer, but it just feels more imminent to me. There's much more conversation about it. And yeah, that I would have, I think I would have been able to have conversations about is this something you might do? What are we thinking about for Mars? Right? It was very much kind of off in the future and a little theoretical. I mean, it's still theoretical, but yeah. So I would absolutely it would be a different book today. Yeah. And having read Kate's book.
Oh, your book had so much great space history. And when you dig into it, there are all these little gems of stories. And this is exactly what you did. You like wove all these gems of bizarre research questions and weird interactions and ideas that people had. You wove them all together. And it's just such a inspiration to reread that book on the plane to Hawaii to get in the dome. I was like, all right, so this is like, it was basically my study guide for what I was going to experience, all those things. The fun thing about writing about space is I mean, there's so many of these stories that are just so weird. Like what happened, what didn't happen, what almost happened, what people talked about. And most books about space have like so many footnotes, and the footnotes themselves are great, like episodes and some like television show that you could use. And so yeah, I don't know, that's something that your book really did well.
I love that you included that, that there was this was I think it was, I don't know, late 60s, that paper on, there was a conference on nutrition and waste related issues in space. And one guy, and now looking back, I think, was that paper a hoax? But I mean, it's there in the national, you know, in the NASA technical reports, but the guy who thought, okay, in terms of what we send, you know, payload, the lighter, the better, food is heavy. What if we just choose overweight astronauts and not send any food? I'm like, dude, did you really publish this paper? I mean, it's an interesting, definitely thinking outside the box. But anyway, I love that you included that.
Oh yeah, I had to. I mean, it just goes to show the thinking of like the body as a system that plugs into these like really engineered systems, and like, well, the body uses food in this way, you know, instead of not really thinking about the psychology of that, like the actual torture of starving someone in space.
Yeah, it was kind of remarkable. It's kind of remarkable. I want to talk about writing as also, but I just want to get people's questions too. Here's one that is, how, if at all, did you experience the simulation, your experience in the simulation change your perspective or approach to life, regular life?
I mean, in so many ways, actually. Yeah. So I brought a lot of books in with me, and I read a lot of poems, and I did a lot of writing in a way that was different for me, because I went in as a science writer, and but I wasn't necessarily writing as a science writer, because you know, as a science writer, you're kind of trying to be objective, and you're looking, you know, from outside an experiment in, and I was inside the experiment looking out. So I kind of I began to notice a lot of things just differently. And, you know, coming out of having been isolated for 4 months, and, you know, this is not a unique experience to people in a Mars simulation. There are all sorts of ways that people are isolated in this world: incarceration and you know, illness, and, you know, just so many ways that, and right now, of course, so many of us are isolated, but those first few moments out were really spectacular. And I thought, I don't ever want to forget this, you know. For days, I noticed the breeze on my skin. Like, let's always notice the breeze. You know, why can't we always notice the breeze? And the sun was particularly strong, and I am a pale person, and so I had to wear a lot of sunscreen, but just like so grateful for this planet's position in the solar system with the sun that is, so just like gratitude on like tiny arm hair scales, and like solar system, like interplanetary scales, for the way that things actually are. So I came out with like a lot of gratitude, and maybe a little bit more noticing of things that I hadn't before. Probably a lot more noticing of things that I hadn't.
Yeah. Let's talk a little about the structure of the book. I mean, before I started it, I was thinking it would be more of a traditional narrative of the 4 months, weaving in some, you know, some factual material, etc. And but you've chosen to do a series of essays, and very contemplative, and you know, it feels like, you know, the poet in you. It's kind of an interesting mix of the poet and the scientist. So that I wondered if you talk a bit about the writing and your decision in terms of the structure of the book.
Yeah. So yeah, it's 12 essays, and they're all linked by the fact that they have something to do with the mission. There's something about the mission that's in all of them, and there's something personal in all of them, like a memory or you know, an experience, and then also a lot of information. There's still a lot of information in this book, and it's research, and that's like the science background. But it occurred to me that you know, this was an experiment. HiSeas was an experiment. Space is always this grand experiment. And the essay form seemed to provide the most flexibility in terms of the way for me to write it, so that I wouldn't necessarily have to hew to a particular genre convention and then like always rein myself in. So the essay allowed me to experiment with what I wanted to, where I wanted to go with the storytelling and how I wanted to tell it. And so I kind of, I really appreciated that freedom. You know, when you call something an essay, you're kind of like free to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So that's what I was looking for in this project.
Yeah. And I would think also you were able to sidestep the reality that when you are in 4 months inside a dome without a lot going on, it could be kind of difficult to create enough variety in the narrative. Kind of like, well, today is very much like yesterday.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. I mean, I was looking at my journal and I just thought there's not a story here. You know, it's just like every day something, but like where is the narrative arc in the actual experience of this? And that said, there are time markers in the book. Like you have a sense of like middle and beginning, pre-mission, post-mission. You have a sense of that, but yeah, in terms of telling the story of the 4 months, like actually, and I wrote this book many years after the actual experiment happened. So and I was waiting for a story of the 4 months to like coalesce for me so that I could do that. And then in the end, I was like, it's still a weird thing that doesn't have a like a received form other than the fact that it was an experiment and we're all just seeing what happened.
Yeah, it would have forced you to make a big deal out of things that weren't that much of a big deal.
Exactly.
You know?
I did not want to like,
yeah, like what
give drama to something that didn't have drama.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, I think the structure worked really well. I mean, you brought in enough of the experience and enough of, you know, the salient information to, you know, to connect the things that you were thinking about with the things that actually happened. I think we have almost 10 minutes left. There's one question here. How do you both think pop culture, historical / artistic, parentheses, sci-fi books, films, representations of space missions, thinking off the top of my head of The Martian or Moon, starring the amazing Sam Rockwell, affect our beliefs about our expectations of the real experience? Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, do you wanna hit that one?
No, you go.
I mean, I think that those depictions are really important to the way that we think about space. And I think that there could be even more, and they could be weirder and more like varied, because I think some of them are still based in what has happened, what has come before, you know, like in real life. So.
Yeah, I think, you know, thinking of The Martian or even Moon, you know, they have to tell a story and they have to have drama and excitement and character drama, explosions, whatever. So it's for the same reason that you're probably not going to have a major motion picture of your experience in the simulator.
I know, I appreciate that money, but yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's I think the boredom isn't well represented. Is the boredom and the day-to-day tedium and stress, just low grade stuff. I think that doesn't come through because, of course, you need to keep it exciting, action-packed, or some sort of psychological thriller. And you know, people who go into space they're chosen for certain psychological attributes like stability, flexibility, ability to compartmentalize, just deal with stuff, not freak out. I mean, they're pretty stable. They're pretty amazing emotionally people. So you know, you're probably not going to have the sort of meltdowns you might see in a popular cultural depiction, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. We have a few more questions. Are there photos we can access of what your rooms and environment look like?
Yeah. Yeah. I think HiSeas.org has all sorts of materials.
HI, not HIGH.
That's
Yeah.
a great point. It's hi-seas.org.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you walk us through the schedule of a typical day?
Okay, so if I can remember, and one of the things that was kind of hard, I think, for me was that the schedule was pretty set. It was pretty stable. We would have breakfast. Well, now I can't remember exactly. Either 8 or 8:30. I think 8:30. We'd have like a half an hour breakfast, and then at 9 we would have a morning meeting that sometimes stretched pretty long, and that was a point of contention. You know, are we gonna every day have a meeting that goes for an hour? Are we going to talk about it? And you know, yeah, it was a lot, but you know what we're doing for the day, what have you. Then it depended on who you were. You'd go work on a project because we all brought projects with us to work on. So yeah, I don't know. There were geologists. There were people who were working on like a robot farm. You know, everyone just had something to fiddle around with. And then we had exercise. So we had an exercise project that we were, an experiment that we were testing out, like antimicrobial exercise wear. And so for that, we had to work out, I think, 45 minutes, 5 days during the week. And so we would do—
Never clean that thing, right?
When we got tired of it, we retired it and like filled out a survey to say how we felt about it. And so, yeah, and we had a bunch that we went through. And yeah, I'm just like remembering the feel of them now. They didn't feel great. I didn't like them very much. So, but we would do these P90X workouts. We had workout partners, so we weren't all working out at the same time. It was staggered throughout the day. We also had a treadmill that you could do. We would have lunch. We would often have lunch together, and then we would go outside or go back to our other projects, you know, and going outside was kind of an ordeal. It was only some of the crew. You'd suit up, and some people had to stay back and like do Capcom basically on a walkie-talkie. And so that, like, EVA is what we called them. That would take a couple hours, and then come back and, you know, work more on the projects, fill out more surveys. We'd have dinner together, and then like supposedly we had free time after dinner, but we were all so far behind on so many of the things that we had brought to do with our projects, and also the surveys that we spent after dinner usually catching up on things, and correspondences, you know, like sneaking those in whenever we could. So it was like that almost every day. Sundays were different. We didn't eat together as a crew until dinner, and so we had mostly a free day, but most people spent that time sort of like just sleeping in and catching up on work that they hadn't been able to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you able to write much poetry?
You know, it wasn't a super generative space for poems for me. You know, I was taking more in, and what I did do was keep a journal in a way that I hadn't before, and that was really useful for me because I paid more attention to what was going on inside my head. So I just got a lot more down, and I also blogged for Discover Magazine. So for every week there was a blog post, and that was really useful. I had a writer's report that I would submit, so my projects were writing, and also I did a sleep study, and I kept track of what I read and what I wrote. And that's something that I've kind of wanted to do during this pandemic. I just hadn't gotten back to it, but it's really nice because you can look back and you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I actually did read these books, these articles, these poems. I had thoughts about them because time just really, the texture of time changes when you're isolated, that's for sure.
Yeah. Let's see, we have a question. What did you find most sustaining in the simulation and during the process of writing your book?
Sustaining, oh, that's a good question. Sustaining in the simulation was, I really think that the relationships of my crew members were really important to me because I found that like, I became close to a number of them, and those friendships were really important. And to be with people who were like-minded, you know, we wanted to do this project. It was really important. You know, not everyone was extroverted, and I think maybe I'm kind of, I could go either way with that, but like I did find myself after dinner hanging out and talking more, so maybe I'm a bit of an extrovert, and that was really important. So I think just like great conversation and sharing ideas, and yeah, that was really sustaining within it. And then in writing the book, the thing that sustained me, probably complaining about writing the book was really important. It's a really important thing for me.
You can always call me anytime you want to complain about writing a book.
Yeah.
I want to say, I don't know if Nick is still here, but Nick Canis, and I don't know if I'm saying it right, had tuned in, and I just want to say hi, Nick. I spoke with Nick when I was talking about the psychology aspects of isolation and simulations back when I wrote Packing for Mars, and so he's apparently out there if he's still there. Hi, Nick. Did you speak at all to him?
I don't think we spoke directly, no, but I'm aware of his work.
Yeah. Anyway, and the last question says, so, comma, who are the Martians?
I think Ray Bradbury would write that the Martians are us.
Good answer. I think, and on that note, it's 6 o'clock, and we should wind it up. There's Carr.
Hi, folks. Thank you for continuing on without me when the internet cut out. If we were talking about, you know, taking 20 minutes to send a message and 20 minutes to receive one. Yeah, thanks for forging on. This was a really great, really special conversation, and I'm really glad that I got to tune in. And thank you, Kate. Thank you, Mary, for sharing your insight and your time with us. It's such a pleasure. It was so, so cool. I did get to hear most of it. I hope you didn't hear me yelling at the internet earlier. And I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you so much to everyone who came. I'm going to go ahead and just plug these two books here right now. We have Kate and Mary's books at the store. You're welcome to pick them up. We have plenty of copies.
Support independent bookstores, everybody, right now, especially, always, but especially right now.
Thank you. Yes. This has been really great, and hope to hear from you folks soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks for tuning in.